Hi there, Wanderers. Now, it's not our goal on this show to be overly political, but when necessary, we don't want to shy away from making a statement. And after the events that happened yesterday, I do feel like it's necessary to make a brief statement. Now, you may have seen some of the photos yesterday of the insurrectionists storming the Capitol. Several members prominent in some of the photos wearing assumedly animal skins or horns, carrying a spear, adorned with tattoos that represent heathenry and the heathen faith. And I wanted to take this moment to say this is nothing, what happened yesterday is in no way supported by heathenry. The heathen religion, practicing pagans, practicing witches, or shamans. The man carrying a spear, calling himself the QAnon shaman, I personally take offense to as a practicing shaman, and want to take this moment to condemn his actions and the actions of those he was with. This does not represent the values of the practices of heathenry, and quite frankly, if that man had any real connection to Asatru or heathen values, yesterday would not have won him a spot in Valhalla. Let's just say that. Now, this week's episode is going to be mostly just a short tutorial. We're going to continue our path looking at the rocks that we've been digging and cleaned up last week. We're going to look at cutting them today with a Lapidary Saw that I got this past Yule season, and then we'll finish up that journey next week with polishing them. But for now, let's look at how to set up our 6-inch high-tech diamond lapidary cutting saw. And we are here to unbox the high-tech diamond 6-inch lap saw. Lapidary, not saw for your lap. And again, I think they have a pretty good instructional, I think they have a pretty good instructional video on their website about how to put it all together. And so I'm not going to try and detail that for you here. I'll just direct you to their video, and yeah, let's pull all this out and see what we're working with. I do think this is more complicated than the flat lap, the grinding table, and I got the version with the vise on the side so that you can make more precise cuts, which obviously I will show. I am very excited about that. Yes, and of course one of these wonderful, I'm not joking, I really love these high-tech aprons for the rock cutting. I don't know, there's something about having a lab coat type thing. But anyway, so let's pull this out of here. See if you can see it. Ooh, yay. Let's pull this out of here and set it up and see how it goes. We've got both our cutting setups here. We've got the saw, our 6-inch lapidary saw that we just unpacked, and our freehand cutting setup that we'll use the Dremel with a diamond cutting blade tool attachment for some freehand stuff. Now, I've picked out a batch of about 15 or so rocks, all approximately 3 ounces before we start. That doesn't really matter. After I clean them, like we talked about last week, I store them by ounce size just so I know a little bit about what's going on. I've got a few that we will cut up first on the saw, like the one we just looked at, and then we'll clean up a bit from what the saw did and do some other freehand stuff for some stuff that's maybe too small for the saw or too flexible. We'll see as we go through on the saw which ones don't really work the best for that setup and might need a more hands-on or a freehand approach. Now, of course, you can freehand stuff with the saw, but we got the saw with an attachment so we can guide. Like I said, we'll go through all the different techniques. Now, one thing that is very important is having a particle mask. Of course, everything is water and weighted down and, you know, collecting the dust and not supposed to come back at you, but you don't want this silica dust in your lungs, so it's always better to be safe than sorry. Wear some goggles if you don't wear glasses normally, and of course on our freehand tool, and we'll go over this later, but we've got some plexiglass shielding. Again, always better to be safe rather than sorry, because sometimes some little chips of rocks do fly out, and that dust, silica dust will, when it dries, it hardens up sort of like concrete, so you definitely don't want that in your lungs. So be sure to wear your mask. We should all be pretty familiar with masks around now. But yeah, let's get started on the 6-inch lap saw and get cutting some of these wonderful little smokies.
Now I think a few of these they have some pretty decently defined edges, so they can probably just be sanded down on the grinding stone, so we probably don't need to make any cuts on those, just because I'm going to try to have some more irregular forms in this, and then I'll try and take some of these and cut them down into, it looks like this batch is going to be a lot of like, I guess I'm going to go for some sort of like rectangular prism type things that stand up, have 4 sides or some of that. But a few of these edges, since I don't have my really coarse grinding stone yet, I want to cut off some of this roughness so that there's a more uniform edge to take to the grinding wheel. So we'll revisit these next week, and let's see what of these we can cut down and get some stuff going.
Now again, this is the assembled high-tech diamond 6-inch lapidary cutting wheel saw. It's not too difficult to assemble. I got the, like I said, I got the guide attachment that you can secure. Remove this. It's the splash guard. I got the guide attachment that you can secure gems in. We'll go over that and how that works, but it helps with making some clean cuts. And like I said, they have a pretty decent video on how to assemble it, and the book is pretty good. So I'm not going to worry about showing you kind of how to assemble it. It was pretty easy. Like I said, there's a link to that. Now, they come with a few blades when you order it, and you can order different blades from High-Tech Diamond, but since we're cutting quartz, we're going to use the red diamond blade. As you can see, I've already used it some, so that red does come off when you use it. That's fine, don't worry about it. And you can sharpen their blades with a brick or carbide stone, and so I'm sure in a few weeks we will have the Grim Ringer on to help show us how to properly sharpen blades on machetes, saws, knives for leatherworking. You know, we'll have a good sharpening episode here coming up. So, like I said, you just put it in and you pop this plate off. The water reservoir is under here, so we'll fill this up with water. And on the arbor here, you just unscrew this little bit. If you can't see what I'm doing very well, like I said, look on the video that they have on the website. But it's pretty simple. You just want to put the blade on there, it fits right on, tighten it back up, and you tighten it just beyond hand tight. So you don't want to over tighten. That's very important. So, and now we're going to put water in there, but you want to slip the cover back on and spin the blade. Make sure that it's not making contact with your guard. So that's pretty good. And let's get some water in there. Now, once you've got your saw blade on and your reservoir full of water, again, fill it up to about 1/8 of an inch, to where the saw blade is 1/8 of an inch underwater. You're going to want to get your mask, and I recommend, it's not super loud, but I do a lot of work with saws between carpentry and lapidary and lots of stuff, so I always recommend having some good hearing protection. And you're going to get those and get ready to go.
We're just going to kind of run through this. Using the lapidary saw is a lot like using a table saw or a tile saw. As you can see, I've got my guidelines because I was cutting in the middle of this stone. I think the biggest difference is you do want to go a lot slower. Now, I've sped this video up quite a bit, so I'm not actually cutting that fast. You just want to make sure that you don't force the rock. As you can see, I kind of wiggled it back and forth there a little bit to get it to cut and take. But once you've sort of got a groove in the rock, it'll cut pretty nicely, as you can see. And sometimes you just gotta wiggle it back and forth a little bit, work on the stone, work the stone through the blade, and you'll get a cut eventually. You really don't want to like snap the blade or anything. So here's the guide, which was a feature I'm pretty excited about. Now, to be fully honest, I didn't really feel like it helped me so much with this batch of rocks. I think that there's a lot of good uses for it, especially if you're trying to cut some really specific shapes. So what I did there actually is I used a little piece of stone that had been cut off to steady the blade. Like I said, the blade is not it's not flimsy, but like it's not super rigid, so it will bend a little bit. And so just sometimes I found that it helps to hold a little chip of rock there beside the blade, just to help it not bend away from the rock. And I actually was having too much of a problem with the guide on this particular rock with the blade not staying aligned. I decided to do it by hand. But again, using the lap saw is pretty simple. It's very similar to a table saw. Just be a lot slower and more gentle with your rocks. And as you can see, making some pretty good cuts. And it doesn't take too long. I did speed this up, but it's not that long of a process. So these edges ended up coming out pretty nice. This is going to be a nice piece. I like the color there. You can see it. Of course, wet is a little preview of what it'll look like. It'll be darker than that polished, but that'll be a nice little piece. I really love this pocket. It's got a lot of smoky and with iron inclusions and stuff. Let's finish up a few more of these pieces and then jump on over to the Dremel tool cutting setup. Here's a look at not all of the stones. I've got a few more over here, but a look at some of the stones after we got done on the saw. Like I said, next we're going to go to the Dremel. Again, don't get rid of your refuse. You can use these pieces, you know, we'll grind them down and smooth them out a bit and wrap them. I don't have electroplating stuff yet. We will get to it in the future, but certainly, you know, wrapping them and putting them on a necklace is a really simple, easy way to reuse some of these, and like they'll look really cool when they're all polished up as well. And yeah, here's just a look at some of the shapes. I really like these pieces with these interesting inclusions in them. Like, I think this is going to be a really interesting piece when we're done with it. So we'll have to get to those next week, but you know, just got a lot of more simple shapes. Left some rough edges, but cut up a lot. So we'll see. And then, you know, obviously we'll grind these down on the grinding stone so they'll be a little more uniform than they are now, but it'll leave some rough spots. So we'll show. I like playing around with some of that, so I will definitely go over that next week. But let's take a few of these shapes. You know, I was able to get some stuff, but it'll be easier to take off like chunks of this with the Dremel and the hand tool. So let's demonstrate some of that. Now we've lost a little bit of our sunlight, and that means temperature, and so I put my coveralls on because I'm cold. But, so we've got everything here, and I should have made a tutorial on how I built this, but honestly, it was really simple, and I got a little excited, so I made it and then was like, oh, I should have filmed that. But basically, I had literally, I think this is one like 4-foot long board, or maybe a 5-foot long board that was like a 5-foot by 4 inches wide, 1 inch thick, 5 feet long, I think. And so I cut it down the middle once on the table saw, and then cut it into all these lengths. And I did the sizing based on this is just an old bucket that I had. It has a top, so like it's a old plastic storage container. So like that's just gonna be your water catch. And the most complicated part about this is literally this, which this is a Plexiglas Shield that slips right into here to protect water spray back. And I had these interesting hinge thingies. It could be done with any type of hinge, but I just had this one, so like theoretically I could loosen these up and move it around, but I like that I can, you know, sort of adjust the angle that way or this way real easy. But that was the most complicated part, putting those on. I just cut the board up, cut it into the sizes that it needed to be, put them together, took the nail gun, boom, 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 boom. I did stain it a little bit just because it's going to be getting wet, so I put a little stain on there. But again, so this is your shielding for your hand cutting station. I guess I could have started with that. Again, this bucket is to catch water, and this plexiglass is to keep water from spraying into your face. I also took some 2x4s and cut them up and just built this. Holds our water container. Now we'll probably, at some point I'm going to redo the shed and make a nice big setup for all the saws, and so we'll definitely have that on film. And I'll probably make a new water container reservoir, but for now this is just literally a drinking water 2.5 gallon thing. You know, you pull the top out, water comes out. So you always want your saws to be cutting wet. Again, it helps collect some of this dust that you don't want in your lungs and helps keep the blades cool, even though you will see some sparks here and there. So let's move everything into position and start cutting. So again, we're making these cuts with the Dremel. I have the Dremel 200 series, so it's not even the most powerful one. It's just a simple Dremel. We're using the Easy Lock diamond wheel cutoff blade type thing. My biggest complaint about this process is that these little wheels are $30 a piece, and I do think that's a little steep because they're really, I think I've been using this one and I flipped it over. It looks a little better on that side. I think I can probably pull 2.5 hours of grinding out, but like I was watching one video and a guy was like using a new one of these on every stone, and I'm like, that's just too much. The stones aren't worth that much, you know, unless he was getting like a really good deal. But you said you can definitely push them longer than that. But just again, like with anything, you know, you got to know your blade and sort of work with it. You don't want to push the process. You want to go slow. So just feel it out. You'll know when the attachment isn't really cutting anymore. So let's plug everything up and get started. So I really don't have a ton to do on this piece. I'll have to do probably a whole nother video just on the Dremel and some different stuff that it can do, whether it be cutting or there's a few other techniques that you can do. So we'll revisit that. But the saw didn't quite get this edge clear, so I wanted to just come in here and clean that up a bit, and honestly don't really know what I'm doing on this side of the rock, so I'm just gonna kind of cut into it a little bit. Honestly, not sure how this is gonna turn out of all the pieces, but like I said, it's just still a little, it's kind of big to take, and I guess I could have powered through it on the saw, but I wanted some stuff to show y'all. So I'm just gonna kind of cut around and see what I can knock off with this one.
Hi there, Wanderers. I was just getting another batch of stones ready to take over to the grinder and polish away. But if you're sick of stone-related stuff, good news. Next week's our last video in this series covering everything from rockhounding to polishing up and doing some lapidary work. So just one more week to bear with us. And then we're going to change pace a little and show you some of the new materials and products that we've been making that we're going to have for sale at our upcoming Oddities and Curiosities Expos that we'll be at in late February. So, as always, if you like what we're doing, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, check out some of our other videos, and then tune in next week where we finally finish this lapidary arc and get some fully polished crystals. Until then, keep wondering. Well, we're definitely going to end each episode with like 15 seconds of goats.
Yeah, that's